Good evening. This week's Parshat Mishpatim has many of the torts, guidelines, and regulations that involve the dynamics between two members of the Jewish people, whether they're business partners, whether they're a bunch of guys who had a little bit too much to drink at Kiddush Club and got into a fight at the main Kiddush, with resulting consequences, whether said drunkards from said Kiddush Club then took said other drunkards, sheep or cow, away, what the consequences are, and so on and so forth. Curiously enough, near the end of the parsha, Hashem describes the umbrella process through which the Jewish people would take control over the land of Israel. And there's a very interesting few psukim where Hashem describes his plan for the Jewish people entering the land of Israel, conquering the land of Israel, and settling the land of Israel. And the Torah mentions a curious, what Rashi, quoting our rabbis, explain is a type of wasp, a tzira, that would squirt venom from one side of the Jordan River to the army of the Canaanim, of the Canaanites, and their allies, blinding them, and which would end up killing them. It was like, wow, it seems, pretty neat. You try writing that one up in Hollywood. How is anyone going to believe that? Well, Torah says that's what would be happening. So you can imagine the Canaanim hear about this, and they have about 40 years to prepare. Doesn't seem to have helped. Fast forward to the account in the book of Yehoshua, the book of Joshua, regarding how that conquest played out. But then in our parsha, Hashem notes that I'm not going to allow you, the Jewish people, to take control over the land of Israel in 1 year. It's not going to happen. It's kind of a little puzzling if we take a pause in the verse at that point, because we're already having this miraculous tzirah that's going to blind the eyes of those who live in the land of Canaan. It's going to be militarily wide open. Why not create a dynamic where the Jewish people are able to conquer and settle the land of Israel in 1 year? Why does Hashem say, I'm not going to let this happen? So Hashem answers the question. And Hashem says that it's going to take more than a year, lest the land be empty, besides for the Jewish people, and thereby leading to an increase in the wild animals, which would then terrorize the Jews who would be moving in to their new homeland. Now, Torah says it's going to take many years to settle the land of Israel. And fast forwarding to the book of Yehoshua, to Sefer Yehoshua, we see that it did take well more than a decade before the Jewish people had taken over the land of Israel. And in fact, if you look closely near the end of the book of Yehoshua and into the book of Judges, the book of Shoftim, which follows, you'll note that many parts of what is assumed to be Israel in its current borders, the Jewish people didn't have control over, even after Yehoshua led the conquest of what would end up becoming most of the land of Israel. The final conquest took more years. So we see that Hashem's caveat in the Torah, that it's going to take more than 1 year, took place. And I think this provides an important caveat in our own lives. Because sometimes we find ourselves in a situation that is less than savory, is annoying, is difficult, is frustrating, is stressful, is anxiety-provoking, is depressing. Fill in a negative word. We find ourselves in situations in which we don't want to be. We didn't ask for them. We didn't do anything, at least in our own minds, to contribute to that situation. But there we are. We don't want to be there. We find ourselves in a place that makes us uncomfortable, or that is inconvenient. But we can learn from Hashem's foreshadowing of the conquest of the land of Israel that it's going to take a little bit more time. Now put yourselves in the shoes of the Jewish people. They've just left Egypt. Parshat Mishpatim is conveyed to the Jewish people months after they had left. They're going. They're running from the Egyptians. They're so glad to be gone with them. They saw that the Egyptian tormentors drowned in the Yam Suf. They get the Torah. They're moving. It's great. Like full steam ahead. You don't want to be that toll booth collector in the face of the entire Jewish people running towards you. And just think about how much excitement there is. And Hashem says these are the guidelines for how you're going to interact as a society. Among other things, treat the widow and orphan properly. Okay, great. We're going to be lawful, we're going to be just. Everything that Hashem says, Na'aseh v'nishma, we're going to do, as the end of the parsha has. And then God gives the downer. It's going to take more than a year? Are you serious? We just got out. It's like telling someone who's leaving prison, by the way, you're not going to be able to fully reintegrate into society for a long time. You got to be kidding me. I paid my debt to society. Jewish people are there for hundreds of years in Egypt as slaves. Why can't we go right in? Hashem provides the answer. Because I don't want you to die from the wild animals that will reproduce way too fast for you guys to take care of if you conquer the land of Israel in less than a year. We see that God had a plan. As annoyed as the Jewish people are that they don't have what would be their ancestral homeland, I say would be because at that point they hadn't yet divided it amongst the tribes. So they're sitting in a tent camp for more than a decade. After just doing it for about 40 years in the desert. You'd think they'd be done with tents. Like that's why Jews don't go camping, because we're sick and tired of tents after more than 50 years of dealing with tents. So Jews don't camp, we glamp. Like maybe borderline RV, maybe like bungalow cabin with internet service, running water, fridge that's fully stocked, and a shower. Did I mention the air conditioning? It's got to have air conditioning. Right? So we're done with camping. Right? And Jewish people are sitting there on shpilkas. How about now? Nope. How about now? No. Why? Because Hashem has a plan. The Jews who are in those tents, waiting for the land of Israel to be divvied up, had two choices. One, kvetch, whine, moan. Bemoan the fact that they're not where they want to be. But option two, which is based on listening to Parshat Mishpatim, is that wasn't the plan anyway. Therefore, be patient. Chillax. Take a powder. I don't know what that phrase from like the 1950s is. I heard it in MASH once. It kind of sounded cool. I still don't know what exactly that's supposed to mean. But take a powder. Take a chill pill. Go run around the camp a little bit, little kids. You have too much energy in the tent? Go run around. Do laps. That's so far. Just do laps. Matt, what'd I tell you? Do something to be patient, because understand this is part of a greater plan. If Hashem foreshadowed that it would take a while to settle into the land of Israel, and as inconvenient, as frustrating as it may have been to those who were going through that period of time, but that there was a reason, there's a rationale, there was divine logic, we should keep in mind that so too in our own lives. It doesn't mean it's any less frustrating. It doesn't mean that it's any less inconvenient. It doesn't mean that it's any less stressful. But our mentality will now be that's a more positive one. We'll be focused on, okay, I'm in this situation. How can I look at it in a positive light? For the Jews sitting in the tents, that would be like, oh, I'm not being mauled to death by a wild buffalo or a wild lion. Right? I'm not dead yet. That's a good sign. The Jews who had that mentality, while they were waiting for the land of Israel to be fully conquered, were much better off than those who may not have that mentality. The message from Parshat Mishpatim, foreshadowing this element of the settling of the land of Israel, is that God has a plan and it makes sense. So sit down, buckle up, relax, and enjoy the ride. Have a great week.